Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and for Asian American and Pride Month appreciation, I decided to combine these two and talk about that of George Takei. Or is it Takei? I'm not really sure how to pronounce his last name. I've been pronouncing that man's last name wrong for years. But anyways, as you know, for like Appreciation Month, I like to talk about and review television shows or characters, this and that. However, when it comes to that of Star Trek, I can't really review an episode with Sulu in it because, George Takei, he played Sulu. And the reason for that is because Sulu never really had no centric episode, nothing that followed his character. And there are times, it was the 1960s. It was a completely different time back then. Television shows were all about the hero, the sidekick, and the ally. And Kirk was the hero, Spock was the sidekick, and Bones was that of the ally and stuff. And it left all the other characters just kind of there, not really doing too much, especially the diverse characters and stuff like males. Asian characters, black characters, Russian character. They really didn't do nothing with those characters that much. They kind of just appeared there, didn't really do much. Sometimes they rarely ever said anything. So it was completely different times back then. And plus, the 1960s were very prejudiced. I mean, Klingons were based off of Asian people. And I kid you not. It's been well documented and stuff. The reason why their mustaches look the way they do, the reason why they fight with bladed weapons, the reason why their uniforms look the way they did in the 1960s, they're based on like Asian culture and stuff. And they were made to mock them and show Asian people be like barbarians and stuff like that. Very prejudiced times. And so just like with Geordie LaForge, LeVar Burton, I can't really talk about a solo episode that centers around him because Geordie really didn't have no good solo episodes and stuff. And Sulu really didn't have like much. But at least I could talk about George and everything. And in fact, George is actually not his real name. Most Asian people, they have like very authentic Asian names, but then they change them to American. I'm gonna try to pronounce this. His original name is Hosato Takei. And he was born on April 20th, 1937. And as of the recording, he is 89 years old. This man is truly remarkable and has done a lot more than I've ever known and stuff. I just know him as Sulu and everything. But I also know that, of course, he is part of the LGBT community and an advocate and everything. But, I remember many years ago, I saw on PBS. He was put in one of those because America was going through like a war back then, like World War II and stuff. He was put in one of those segregation camps where him and his family literally had to live in. And I remember thinking to myself when I saw them people like, what? Oh my God, Sulu. Like he lived in one of those places? I couldn't believe it. Because of the simple fact, Americans, and by Americans I mean white Americans, assumed every Asian person was, or at least every Japanese person was like part of working with Nazi Germany. Because Japan had like allied themselves with Nazi Germany and everything. And so they just automatically assume a lot of Asian people, especially Japanese people, were like traitors and stuff. And I couldn't believe he had to live in one of those places. He talks about it every once in a while, and I'm sure you can find an interview about that on the internet. And yes, he is Japanese and stuff. And he came out in 2005 'cause he couldn't come out back in the day because that would have been way too dangerous for him. Because I mean, if people was very prejudiced back in like the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even the 90s and stuff, it just wasn't safe to not only be a person of color, but a gay person of color at that. And so, like, trying to think. So, like, he started his Hollywood career, after college, after he graduated from California. And so, like, when he first started, he did like voiceover, dubbing English for like Japanese characters, monster films, stuff like that, Godzilla of all things. And I remember one time he told a story in an interview, and I'll never forget this. He said he did a movie, and I forget what it was called. And he played like an assistant to that of like sensei, right? And the sensei was a white man in yellow face playing like an Asian character. And of course, in the dialogue, he had to call that character master, this and that. He was so upset having to play that role and having to watch this person portray his people in a huge stereotype, talking in tongues, acting kind of like silly a little bit, and just completely disrespecting his culture and everything. And this is exactly why woke culture was so prevalent a few years back, because people were tired of seeing this. And this is why representation matters, and why playing your own race of a character is very important. Instead of always having like somebody else of another race, mainly white, do it. So I talked about extensively how like every time you see like a Mexican character in American television, they're almost never played by a Mexican, not even today. And then, of course, he landed a role of a lifetime playing Sulu and everything on Star Trek, the original series. And this was 1965. And this was a time where they just really didn't like people of color. And I do wonder, did he ever experience any racism or prejudice back then? Because Nichelle Nichols, she almost quit the show because she was experiencing racism and stuff by like the crew members, not the bridge crew of the Enterprise, but like the production crew. But Martin Luther King persuaded her to stay. And so it makes you wonder if she dealt with prejudice and racism and stuff on the show. I know he had to and everything. But so far, I don't believe he's ever spoken about it. And it does make me wonder, till this day, why does he dislike William Shatner so much? He has a huge disdain for William Shatner, but he won't say why. And William doesn't have no clue as to why George hates him so much. And maybe one day we'll find out, maybe we won't. Or maybe he just won't say because he knows nobody will probably believe him, because William Shatner will always be James T. Kirk in everybody's mind. And this was back in the 60s, and of course 60s and 70s and 80s were a very, very edgy, prejudiced time. There's really no telling what the heck William probably did or said and probably forgot about, because William Shatner, his old age, has become grumpy and everything. The stories I have been seeing in interviews about William Shatner from YouTubers, how it was like a one-sided like argument between him and those red letter media people, those YouTubers. All because they made, I think, like maybe one joke or something like that, and he just like got extremely pissed. Then there was the whole Brent Spiner thing, which, by the way, him and Brent are friends. But something happened in the interview, and I forgot what Brent said, but it was something like William called him up and was just pissed at him about something. I think like a voicemail or something. And Brent's all like, I have no idea like what you're talking about and stuff. But William just like stopped talking to him. Then Brent was gonna try to smooth things over, but then William completely forgot that something had happened. It was something like in a tweet or something like that. I don't know what. But like I said before, there's no telling what happened between him and George on the set of that show. And because, like, I remember one time I read that when they did the animated series after the live action one got canceled, the producers decided, hey, now the perfect time is to get rid of the black woman on the show. So they didn't want Nichelle to come back. But everybody who was part of the cast voiced support for her and everything, said that they would not do the show if she did not come back. And as you read the list that's still online, everybody's name is on there except for William, surprisingly. So, like I said before, ain't no telling. Now, the thing about Sulu that's interesting is I knew he was the helmsman and everything, but apparently he never started off like that. In the second pilot, which I still haven't seen, I haven't seen every episode of TOS yet. I've seen a lot, but not all of them. He was an astroscience physicist and everything. I'm like, what? He's the helmsman. But apparently that's what he was in like the pilot. But then they changed him to the helmsman. I wonder, did they do that because he's an Asian man? And they thought to themselves, hey, you know, a white audience isn't going to want to see this Asian dude be all smart and this and that. And I say that because of the original first pilot, where they had a female first officer. And she was front and center next to where Sulu would be sitting. And when they did the second pilot, they made a bunch of changes. They took that female first officer out because they said a white male audience isn't going to want to see a woman in charge and taking like second in command. They later made that actress the nurse, where she barely appeared in the show. And so it does make me wonder, you know, if the reason why he was changed to a helmsman is because of a very similar reason. Because think about it. The dude is front and center, right in front of the captain's seat and everything. So everybody's going to be seeing him in every episode. They put Nichelle Nichols, who's black, behind the captain's seat and everything. So you can't really see her from a faraway distance. Things were so prejudiced back in those days. And so they say in the second season, he was supposed to be given more to do. Because I remember every episode I watch, he barely does anything. Like I do. The only thing I remember about him is that mirror episode. Well, he got a lot to say, but he was being very vulgar because that was his mirror counterpart. Then there is the episode he's on an alien planet and he's freezing to death. And they couldn't rescue him and stuff. And then there was the episode where it was supposed to be a spinoff of kind of like they went back in time. There's this guy who's like a special agent. And him and Kurt were fighting these dudes. But Sulu ended up kind of like not being able to hold his own all the time in that fight. I'm just kind of like, what? Then, of course, there's the episode where he had that sword. And then there's that one episode where something happened. They had to give him a hypo spray, and then the end credits, as it was going towards the end credits, showed him smiling, which was shocking because the episodes always end on Kirk, and this was one episode that ended on him. So he was supposed to get more to do in the second season, but he was filming, I think, like a movie. So they gave most of his stuff to the new character of Chekhov and everything. And when he came back, a lot of his stuff was just split between him and Chekhov. And it's like he didn't get that much to do. And they made him share like a dressing room and a script with the actor who plays Chekhov and stuff. And he said originally he did feel threatened by him, thinking, oh, this guy's gonna like, you know, take my job and stuff like that. But they ended up becoming the best of friends, which was great. Now, in one of the Star Trek movies, they made him captain. And this was huge and everything. I remember seeing that movie thinking, where's Sulu at? And like, wait, he's a captain? Like, how is this gonna play out? Now that, like, like, what's he gonna do? What's his ship gonna do? He fought and fought and fought to have his character do a lot in that movie as captain, but they would not budge. And it's basically just him and his ship waiting for, like, a signal to rescue, like, Kirk and stuff like that. Later, that episode was or that movie was, that scene was more expanded upon in Star Trek Voyager, where he guest starred doing like a flashback sequence for Tuvok and everything. That was really cool. He said that he had hoped to work with Garrett Wang, I can't remember his name, who played Ensign Kim. Because, he's also an Asian man, but sadly they had no scenes together. Because when it comes to Star Trek, there isn't that many Asian main characters. It's very, very few. And Star Trek has been around since the 1960s and stuff. Like, it's like, what? Like, and it's just kind of like there's him. There's a dude who played him in the movies. Keiko was a recurring character, but not main. So she don't count. There's Ensign Kim, so that's 3. There's Strange New Worlds. And then there's Enterprise. So there's only really been about 5 main Asian characters on Star Trek. Oh, then there, of course, there's Lower Decks. I think that actress is Asian. I'm not sure because I don't watch that show. But yeah, there hasn't been much Asian representation in, like, Star Trek. You don't even really see an Asian guest star or down on the alien planet. Keiko and that one lady from who was the nurse, Ogawa, those were really it in Next Generation. And they were recurring guest appearances and stuff. And it's quite sad, to tell you the truth, Because I remember Garrett Wang said he had to fight hard just to be able to do something in this show. So not much has really changed in about close to 55, close to 60 years and stuff. And so other than that, like, Takei, he written a science fiction novel. He's been, still acting both live action and voice till like this day and everything. And he's one of the rare few people to star in both Star Trek and Star Wars. But of course, he is a gay man. And he's been advocating for that for decades and stuff, raising money for like Boy Scouts and like, other like fundraiser type stuff. And it's really amazing how much you don't know about these celebrities. They do so much, but you never really hear about them. Now, if it's a Kardashian, that's all you ever hear about. But it's like, yeah, this dude has like done so much for the community, the Asian community, the LGBT community, and just people like in general and stuff, Now, sadly, he was accused back in the day. Oh, what was it? Back in 2017, sexual misconduct by this one guy, which he says never happened, and he doesn't even remember who that guy is. But then in 2018, that same guy recanted his story and changed it around. And it's just kind of like, this is exactly why when people are accused, you need to wait, investigate to see what happens, because a lot of people will lie, especially if the person is famous and they don't like that person. And so, it sucks I can't like review that of like a episode with like Sulu in it, but this is the best I can do and stuff. And I advise everybody to check out like a lot of the stuff he advocates for. He also endorses like a lot of political people, people who have the best interest for like the country and like his community and stuff. And sorry about that. My head is hurting. I have tinnitus. My head's been killing me all day. But yeah, it's just like I'm glad he was in Star Trek because if he wasn't, I wouldn't know like who this dude would be, who he is. And even though he has starred in many stuff, like it's Star Trek that made this dude famous. And like over the years and decades and stuff, he's been honored with lots of stuff. The GLAAD Award, Japanese National Museum honored him. The where he graduated, the California State of University, has honored him and stuff. And seriously, when I think of like famous Asian people, the one pretty much the main one famous Asian person I always think about is always him. Other people later, like who's done martial arts, like say Jackie Chan or Jet Li and stuff like that. But when I think of like somebody who paved the way and was a trailblazer on television during a time when it was hard for representation, he always comes to my mind. And he even has a Hollywood Walk of Fame back in 1986. So this man has accomplished a lot in his life.